Now that we've talked about sources of federal revenue, where does the federal government get the money? Where does the state of California get money? Where does the city of Covina, Glendora, San Dimas, County of Los Angeles, where do they get money? Well, on page 242 are some box charts that show you where the state and the local governments get money. Okay? One of the biggest boxes, or the biggest box in both of those stacks, is something called intergovernmental revenue. Intergovernmental. If you remember back to interdependence, the word inter means between governments. What that means is the federal government gives money to the state of California. That's the yellow box at the top of the state stack there on page 242 rather. Okay? The state of California turns around and gives some money to the city of Covina. Again, that's the yellow box on the other stack. Intergovernmental is money that is transferred from one government to another, or between governments. Okay? Now, the federal government doesn't get any of this. Money only flows downhill. The federal government gives it to the state, and the states give it to the cities. It never goes backwards. Okay? The federal government does not receive money. Okay? So intergovernmental revenue. That's not a tax. It's just tax dollars from some other source that are moved from one government to another. Okay? All right, so where do states get money? Okay? One of the biggest sources of revenue in the state of California, in fact, the biggest one, is income tax. Okay? This is a little bit out of order from the text, but income tax is the biggest source of revenue for the state of California. Okay? And you're saying, I thought we paid federal income tax. Well, that's true. We do pay federal income tax. We also pay California state income tax. So on or before April 15th of every year, not only do you have to file a federal tax return, you have to file a California state income tax return. Okay. California income tax is the highest in the country. Again, we're number one. We have the highest income tax rates in the entire country. Okay. How high can our tax rate go? The maximum is 13.3%. If you make over $1 million in taxable income, and that's a lot of money, don't get me wrong, $1 million, it's 13.3%. That's the maximum in the state of California. Mm-hmm. My tax rate is 9.3%. That's still pretty high. It's almost 10% of what I make has to go toward California state income tax. Mm-hmm. Now, do all states charge income tax? Okay. Do all states charge income tax the same way? No. California income tax is a progressive tax. There's that word again. It means the more you make, the more you pay. So a guy who makes $1 million is paying 13.3%. A guy like me is only paying 9.3%. And somebody like you might only be paying 1 or 2% a year. Okay. Other states have a flat or proportional tax where everybody pays the same percentage. And there's actually 7 states that charge no income tax at all. What are some of the states that charge no income tax? Nevada, Florida, Texas, Washington, Alaska. Okay. How is it that they can get away with not charging state income tax? How is it that they don't charge their citizens an income tax? Well, it's because they have some other source of revenue, some other source of getting money. For example, what do they have in Nevada that brings in a lot of money to the state so they don't have to charge their citizens an income tax? Sure, it's all the casinos, all the money that comes in from the casinos and the tourism there. Okay? That's the same thing in Florida. Florida has a lot of vacation spots, a lot of tourism, right? They've got Disney World and Epcot Center and all that kind of stuff. Well, all the money that comes in from that It means they don't have to charge their citizens an income tax. Okay? We're going to talk about Alaska a little bit later on as well. Okay? So income tax is a big source of money for most state governments. Not all, but most state governments. What about sales tax? That's another major slice of the pie. Okay? And I know the book says it's number 2. In California, it's actually number 3. But overall, it's a very large producer of money. What is sales tax? Well, sales tax is a tax on stuff that you buy. Okay? You go buy a pair of pants, or if you buy a car, okay, you're going to pay sales tax. Okay? But not all things are subject to sales tax. You don't pay a sales tax on everything that you buy. For example, you don't pay sales tax on services. Okay? If someone fixes your car and they put in a new radiator, you're going to pay sales tax on the radiator, but you're not going to pay tax on the labor that there was installing that, the service or the labor to install it. Okay? That's why when you go to the barber shop, you don't pay sales tax on your haircut. It's a service. Okay? You don't pay tax on unprepared food. What does that mean? That means if I go to McDonald's, I'm going to pay sales tax on a Big Mac because they cooked it for me. But if they don't cook it for me, so if I went to Stater Brothers and I bought meat and buns and lettuce and tomatoes and cheese, would I pay sales tax on that food? I would not. Okay? We're going to talk about it in class. I'm going to give you some good advice when you go to Subway on how to get a sandwich with no sales tax. Okay? All right, so sales tax is a tax that is charged when we buy stuff. But who collects sales tax? In the state of California, it's both a state and local tax. That's important. That's a question on the test. Okay? The state sales tax rate in the state of California is 7.25%. Okay? The counties and the cities in Los Angeles County, and the cities in Los Angeles counties add another 2.25% for a sales tax rate of 9.5%. In LA County, where we live in LA County, the sales tax rate is 9.5%. But if you went to Orange County or if you went to San Bernardino County, it's much cheaper. In Orange County, I believe it's 7.75%. Much cheaper. Okay, so if you're thinking about buying something, well, go down to Orange County. It'll be a little bit cheaper. Okay? So in the state of California, sales tax, a tax on stuff that we buy, is collected by both the state and the local governments. So if you look closely at the textbook, you'll see that it's in both of those, both the state stack and the local stack of boxes there on page 242. Okay? And it gets even worse if you live in Covina or Glendora. The city of Covina and the city of Glendora have added even more tax on top of the LA County part. In Covina and Glendora, we pay 10.25%. That's among the highest in the state. Okay? I think Pasadena's 10.5. I think South El Monte is 10.5. Pico Rivera, I think, is 10.5. But we have among the highest sales tax rates anywhere in the state of California. Okay? So what does this mean? If you're trying to decide whether you want to buy something at Costco or at Sam's Club, let's assume they're the exact same price, you know, like a hot dog and a soda. Where is it cheaper? Is it cheaper to buy it at Sam's Club, which is in Glendora, and they charge you 10.25%? Or is it cheaper to buy at Costco, which is in San Dimas, where I live, in San Dimas, where it's only 9.5%? Again, you're better off to buy it at Costco. Okay? So I'm in the market for a big screen TV. Walmart or Sam's Club has it at the same price as Costco. Heck, go over and buy it at Costco. It's going to be a little bit cheaper in the long run because I'm going to pay less sales tax. All right. So state governments, state of California gets money from the federal government, intergovernmental revenue. They collect income tax. Not every state does that. Okay? And they also collect sales tax. Okay? Sales tax is also collected at the local level. Okay? I promised we were going to talk about Alaska a little bit later. There are some states that don't charge a sales tax. Okay? We learned that Nevada doesn't charge income tax. Oregon does not charge a sales tax. And if you've ever traveled to Oregon and bought anything, you've never paid any sales tax. I know I've been on vacation a couple times into Oregon, and it always catches me by surprise when I go to buy something and I go, oh, wait a minute, there's no sales tax here in Oregon. Things are a little bit cheaper because there's no sales tax in Oregon. Okay? Alaska is a special case, and this is on the homework. Alaska doesn't charge income tax or sales tax. How is it that Alaska can get away with not charging either sales tax or income tax? In Alaska, they don't charge either one. What does Alaska have that generates a lot of money? You may have heard of the Alaska Oil Pipeline. They have so much oil in the state of Alaska on government land that when they pump it out and they sell that oil, it makes a lot of money for them. So they don't have to charge their citizens any money for sales tax or income tax. Now, before you go running off to move to Alaska, just remember that it's very cold and it's very expensive there. Okay. All right. So those are your state taxes. What about the local taxes? What taxes are collected by the local government? Well, sales tax is a big one. Okay. In Los Angeles County, 2.25%. And in Covina, another 0.75%, right? They add an extra 0.75%. But the biggest source of revenue for most local governments, cities and counties, is property tax. And this is important to know about, not just for the test, but because it's a big issue right now for California voters. Okay? First of all, what is property tax? If you own property, you have to pay a tax based upon the value of that property. And as we'll learn in Chapter 10, it goes to paying for the police department, the fire department. It goes to help paying for schools and things like that. In Los Angeles County, where you and I live, most likely, the property tax rate is 1.25%. 1.25%. So what does that mean? Well, if you buy the average home, a typical home in the city of Covina, let's say that the house price is $500,000 is the price of the house. So that's what you're going to buy it for. How much are you going to pay in property tax at 1.25%? Well, 500,000 times, that's 1%, 1.25%. Okay. It's $6,250 a year in property tax. $6,250 a year. And in order to pay your property tax, we pay it twice a year. So the County of Los Angeles, in early October or mid-October, they're going to send a bill to all the homeowners and all the property owners in the county of Los Angeles, and they're going to say, pay us half. Pay us half now and pay us another half in February or March. Okay? It's technically not due until April, late until April, so you actually have till April 10th. Okay? But you have to pay half of that every 6 months or so. Okay? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. So if your parents get a little grumpy around November or December, it might be because they're writing a big property tax check to the county of Los Angeles. All right. What does this have to do with today's propositions? Many years ago, in 1978, California voters passed one of the most important laws ever passed in the state of California, called Prop 13. Proposition 13 in 1978 put a limit on property tax increases. Before 1978, if your house was going up in value, so were your property taxes. So if your house went up, say, 10% in value in 1 year, your property taxes went up 10%. And during the 1970s, we had some periods of very, very high inflation. So home prices were rising 10, 15, 20% in 1 year, and people's property taxes were soaring. And so in 1978, California voters said, we got to stop this. And so Prop 13 limits property tax increases to 2% per year. Your property tax can only go up 2% a year. This sounds like a good plan. But what this means is people that bought their houses a long time ago are paying much lower property taxes. For example, my mom owns a house that's probably worth $1 million. But my mom and dad bought that house in 1970. In 1970, they paid $40,000 for the house. $40,000. Okay? So every year the value of the house has gone up, 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 but the property taxes have only gone up 2% a year. Which means my mom is paying a much lower rate. Her property taxes are about $1,400 a year. Okay. The guy across the street bought his house last year. Same $1 million home. Same $1 million home. The guy across the street is paying 1.25%. He's paying $12,500 a year. Do you think that's fair? My mom and the guy across the street have the same home, worth the same amount of money, and she pays just a fraction of what he pays. Now, it would be fair if he got more stuff, but they get the same roads, they get the same schools, they get the same police department, the same fire department, the same sewage system. They get everything the same, and he has to pay way, way more. Okay. Is this fair? Some would argue it's not fair. And on this year's ballot, there are two propositions. This is the most famous of them. Prop 15. This Prop 13, these 2% increases apply to not only residential properties or houses, but also businesses. Okay. So a company that bought their business or built their business back in the 70s is going to be paying a much lower tax rate than someone else. So for example, let's say that you bought or you built a restaurant that's now worth $1 million. The property's worth $1 million. But if you built it in the 1970s, like my mom, maybe you're only paying $1,400 a year. Somebody else builds $1 million property, they're paying $12,500. Might not seem like a big deal for a restaurant, but how about Disneyland? How much do you think their property value has soared since 1978? Well, Proposition 15 would do away with this, would do away with Prop 13 for commercial businesses, for commercial property or businesses. This would generate a lot of money for the state of California. So a lot of people are pushing for Prop 15. A lot of people are saying, well, let's make these businesses pay more. It would not impact houses. It would not impact residential properties, but it would impact commercial property. But what some people don't realize is if you drive up the cost of business, it's going to cause higher prices. If Disneyland has to pay more in property tax, if Disneyland has to pay more in property tax, what are they going to have to do to the price of admission? They're going to have to raise it up. Okay? If that restaurant has to pay more in property tax, then they're going to have to charge more for their meals. A small business that is renting a facility, if the landlord has to pay more in property taxes, they're going to have to charge more in rent. So there's a lot of moving parts to Prop 15. Okay? And the other one's Prop 19. I don't really want to get into that one in the video, but that's another property tax one. Okay? You need to know Prop 13, it's on the test. Prop 13 limited property tax increases to 2% a year because, and so it benefits the people that have been in their homes for a long time.